An alarming new report shows 2023 was a record year for distribution of white supremacist propaganda. The Anti-Defamation League says last year incidents rose 12% to more than 7,000 documented cases of racist, anti-Semitic, and anti-LGBTQ material distributed. It found a 30% rise in anti-Semitic propaganda in 2023, and anti-LGBTQ propaganda more than doubled. For more on this story, we are joined by Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. Jonathan, what a troubling spike we're seeing here. What's behind the trend, and what worries you the most about it?
Yeah, Brianna, it's fairly alarming, but unfortunately, I think it's a sign of the times. And by the way, this was the second year in a row that ADL recorded the highest number of white supremacist propaganda incidents we've ever tracked. We've been doing this work for decades and decades. I think there are multiple forces that are converging in this moment. So on the one hand, I think in this incredibly polarized, politicized environment, extremists feel emboldened because they see people with their views running for election board, running for, other kind of local offices, and people in positions of authority don't always call it out. So number one, extremists feel emboldened. Number two, world events, they're trying to leverage that. We saw white supremacists putting out ugly anti-Semitic, anti-Israel messaging after October the 7th. The convergence of right-wing extremists with left-wing anti-Zionists is real. And I think that has a lot to do with the 30% spike in anti-Semitic propaganda that we saw last year.
The report found the distribution of hateful propaganda was reported in every state except Hawaii and Alaska, and that the most reports of propaganda came from Virginia, Texas, California, New York, and Massachusetts. I wonder why you think there's such a saturation in those specific areas.
Well, we know some of the groups behind this are headquartered and based in those areas. So there's a bit of a Pareto principle, an 80-20 rule here. A few number of groups are responsible for the vast majority. There's a group called the Patriot Front. They're in Texas. A group called the GDL. They're in Florida. And the distribution in those states and the others that you mentioned have a lot to do with where they're able to coordinate their activities. Make no mistake, Brianna, the activity is coordinated. It's organized online, and it's amplified by extremist chatter. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's choreographed. Memes and images and flyers are created and spread through chat rooms and messaging apps. That is in part how they're able to scale the distribution so dramatically. And I think it's scary to see extremists exploiting technology to do such terrible stuff.
How do you combat that? Because as you mentioned, you have Patriot Front, and the numbers are staggering here. Patriot Front responsible for more than 60% of the propaganda distribution, and it's 3 white supremacist groups, which we put up there on the screen, including Patriot Front, that are responsible for 92%. They are responsible for so much of this. How do you combat that when it is coming from these, few places predominantly?
Yeah, so one of the groups called the National Justice Party, they're using slogans that seem sort of right out of like a GOP campaign, like defund the FBI, or talking about the need for repelling the invaders. So they use language that seems political in nature, but if you push down just a little bit, you see things like white solidarity, white power, and other really ugly stuff. So what do we do to combat it? Well, number one, we need a whole of society approach. So people in positions of authority in the GOP or the Democratic Party need to call this out wherever it comes from, and all people in positions of power, whether you're the President of the United States or a university president or a PTA president, Brianna. That's number one. I think number two, people in communal organizations. In this moment of great tension on so many fronts, we still need to see Jewish communities, Christian communities, Muslim communities finding ways to work together. That's really important. And then number three, eventually, Brianna, I think we've talked about this before, social media. We need once and for all to think about, more intelligent rules for the road. that discourage social media companies from amplifying the most intolerant voices. If it clicks, it sort of leads on social media, and that's got to stop once and for all.
Yeah, it certainly needs to get smarter on many fronts. I think many folks would agree with you on that. Jonathan Greenblatt, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Always good to see you.